Hello guys, my name is Darshan Senthil and today I'm going to be walking you through this pretty simple concept of pins. It's a part of my series in chess which I'll be teaching you, and it's a very straightforward concept, very simple to understand if you're dedicated enough, and yeah, it shouldn't take you too long. You're probably using them already without even knowing it. So off we go. So just take a look at this position, and what do you notice particularly about in this side? Like take this piece and this piece for example. What do you notice is happening to them? Well, if you notice, they are sort of in the firing line. Like if you notice, this bishop is attacking this knight, but this knight is also the only thing that stands between the bishop and the black queen over here. Same case with this pawn here on f7. It's the only thing that stands between the firing line of this bishop on b3 and the black king. So when a piece is in such a position, it's said to be pinned, meaning it cannot move without risking this other piece back here. Now there are two sorts of pins. One is like this one, where you're pinning down the queen. This is called a relative pin because this knight could still legally move, and other than just gaining a sort of disadvantage, black would not actually be disallowed from moving the knight here, and this is a pretty important concept that I'll show you towards the end of this video, that this knight is obliged to move. It's only that black will often choose not to, because he'd be risking his queen, which is far more valuable than this bishop. Now the second kind of pin, which is actually the more important, is called absolute. These are absolute pins. Now why they're called absolute is because this piece here cannot move at all, because it's pinned to the king. If it were to move, then the king would be in check. So, and the fundamental rule of chess is you cannot do anything that would put your king in harm's path. So it's not legal, he cannot do it. It's wrong, he cannot move it at all. So even if he had to move this to prevent checkmate, he would not be able to move it. It's ironic, but it's disallowed. So that should give you a basic idea of what pins are. So having said that, let's move on to some examples to jog your brain a bit. Okay, so on to example 1, where I'm just going to show you how you can use a pin to your advantage. Now just take a look at the position, and you'll be playing black here because I feel it's important to give you some perspective on from both colors, not just from one. So take a look for a while and see, and just think what white's best move would be. You're going to use a pin to gain some material here, which is one of the more useful things pins are, one of the more important things pins are for. And also I'll be going over another important concept at this time, so just take a moment and pause the video if you have to, and just find white's best move here. Black's best move, beg your pardon. So hopefully you got it as bishop to b5. So now what this does is it creates an absolute pin where this knight here cannot move at all because it is pinned. So unless the bishop or the king moves, this cannot move at the moment. So because the king is too far away to really help in doing anything here, white's only option is to consolidate with some of his other pieces and sort of hope to defend it. So now the best thing white can do is play his pawn to b3. Now this sort of defends the knight, so even if white were to capture it, at least he can recapture, and while he still lost a piece, he's at least exchanged and not just lost a knight for free. So now what black can do here is he can play his pawn to d5, and this now ensures that white loses material. Notice that the knight still cannot move because it's pinned down, and the pawn is also attacking it now, and the pawn is worth far less than the knight. So no matter what white does here, he can do anything he likes, rook, whatever, he's going to lose that knight now. That knight is gone. Even though black's a piece down, now he can at least bring it to some amount of equality by getting that knight, and hopefully he can consolidate from there on. Now if you've noticed so far, you'll notice that you'll see that none of these attacks are immediate. You're more like building up on something, and that's the nature of pins. They're one of the few tactics I'll be teaching you that are more like dormant and more like potential energy, because you're not going to immediately go and cause havoc here. It's not like skewers or forks where it's one move, bam bam bam, and you've got everything. It's more like a passive thing. Like even in the first position, if you remember, that none of those pins are actually threatening him. It's only like a passive thing where the pin will hurt him later on. Now even immediately here, it's not very common you'll see pins like this in your real games, but most pins you will see are like the ones I showed in the first board, where you've got the king on g8 and the knight on f6, the queen on d8, and the bishop on g5. Now none of those pins could immediately hurt black, or yeah, none of those pins would immediately hurt him, but white could use them and build up on them to cause some serious damage later on. So just keep that in mind. Pins are more dormant, while the other later moves I'm showing you will be a little more aggressive. So this is the more dormant part of chess. So don't feel disappointed if none of your if pins you use are not getting immediate effects. It's just the nature of pins that they do not often yield immediate results. So on to the next example. Okay, so in this problem you'll notice it's white to play here. So in this one the pin is going to be used for another deadly effect, which is to cripple the defender. And in this is sometimes the more beautiful part of pins, where you actually like hold on a defender to grant leeway to your other pieces. Remember that a piece that is held down by an absolute pin cannot move even to defend its king. It's the ironic situation I described to you in the start of the video, and this is the sort of situation that really brings out the beauty of chess. It sort of shows you how beautiful this stuff can do. It looks like he can defend it, but he can't. It's like it's there, but it's not there. So I'm going to show that to you through this pretty basic problem. So take a look at it. If you really have to pause the video, you can, although I don't think you'll need to, because it's a really basic situation. It's pretty straightforward. So okay, let's get going now. So if you really want to pause the video, do so now. So the move here is bishop to g5. Now first, before we do that, let's just consider the scenario here. What's white's motive here? He wants to munch on this d7 pawn here, beg your pardon, and sort of cripple black here, because he's got this bishop and this rook all lined up nicely. Then he's got his rook controlling the c file, his queen controlling the e7 square. So he's got things set up pretty nicely here for a good mate in 2. For its beginner problems, this is pretty simple. So, but unfortunately, with what little material, what pitiful position he has, black still has a defender for this d7 square. So to wrap up things as quickly as possible, white's best move here is, as I just said, bishop to g5. Now this puts another absolute pin on this sorry, it's the other way, an absolute pin on the knight. Now the knight is pretty much crippled. It's gonna go, and now black has no time to reconsolidate and get another defender. So it's pretty much the last game. It doesn't matter what he does here. He can move his pawn. He can do, let's just say he moves his pawn. Then you would continue with your straightforward objective, which is rook takes d7. Now notice in this position that you really don't have to capture him. You don't have to capture him, because it's going to be made in 2 anyways. But just remember that in some positions it's better to capture, because even when he's pinned right now, he might not be pinned a few moves later down the road, and this defender could still cause you a lot of problems when he's not pinned down to the king. So in this position, yes, you can go without taking him because it would be shorter. But just consider when you're calculating like long strings of moves with like 4 or 5 moves, just consider that this defender could cause you problems down the road, and just be careful of that. Be careful. So yeah, mainstream king c8, king e8, rook c8 checkmate. White wins, and this knight really cannot do anything because it's checkmate, and the king could only move like the last move, and this knight could really, you could still capture here actually. Even before taking, you could capture, blah blah blah, but it doesn't really make a difference, since it just prolongs it by 1 move, and it's still gonna be a pretty straightforward win. So this is a pretty simple example. It's a simple example, but it shows you the bigger idea of what pins can be used for. So keep these things in mind when you're playing your games, and just look out for these things. You're probably not going to see anything as straightforward as this, but keep your eye out for them. You can always get something like this. So on to the last example I'll be showing you in this video. Okay, now on to the final example that I'll be showing you in this video. Now this is probably going to be the most important concept I'm going to show you in this video, so please pay attention if you weren't already, which I hope you were, which I hope did happen. So anyways, first thing you notice is you're playing white, and the black rook is sort of pinning this knight down to your queen, and he's just played h5, which means that he's sort of piled up on this knight. So even though you're a queen up, you're still losing it still appears that you're losing the knight. Now just take a step back and just look at this. Now what do you see about this pin that's unique from what we've seen on all the other positions? Now on all the other positions we only saw absolute pins. We only saw absolute pins being put into effect, but however this is a relative pin because this is your queen, not your king. Your king is still safe here on a1, and this knight is still. And what does that mean? What does that mean? If it's a relative pin, then this knight is still obliged to move. He can move if he wanted to. The only thing is this rook would take the queen and it would be checkmate in this case. So just consider this. What do you think white could do here? He could still. Now this is going to be a very important concept for you to know here. So this thing, I'm pretty sure you'll need to pause the video for at least a few seconds. So just look at this and sort of think what white could do here to sort of turn the tables on black. So take a second. Okay, so hopefully there are two solutions to this actually, how white could get out of this pretty easily. Now the first solution would be queen to c1 check. Now what this does is it puts black's king in check. Now black cannot it's again shows the irony. So not irony, sorry, that just shows you that now again black cannot, and king is always comes first, as you've seen so many times in this particular video. The king always comes first, so black cannot afford to take advantage of this pin he's got, this nice little pin he's got over here. He has to move away. He has to get his king to safety, king b7 let's say, and then white can simply bring his knight back to e3 or wherever he wants to, and it's safe, and black's pin has been overridden. He's sort of lost it. So the other move, however, the more aggressive one, would be knight to e5 check. Now again what this does is it puts the king in check. So he's really, again, he cannot afford to take advantage of the pin he's gotten over here. He has to put his king safety first. So he has to move back, and then white can go in and munch on this rook. Just, that's the power of this. Now where black thought he was going to easily win a knight, he's just got himself a rook. He's just lost himself a rook. Now even if he takes back later on, it doesn't matter. He's just lost. He could take it right here if he wanted to. Instead of moving his king to b7, he could take it right here, and you would take this, and it doesn't make a difference. You're a queen up, and this bishop is pretty useless here. You're gonna win it next move, and yeah, this is white's game. So this concept is what's called escaping with tempo. So I like to think of this as like when you're faced with a wall, like with a brick wall that's probably just fairly tall. So if you walk at the wall, you're not gonna get through it. It's just gonna be there like a solid barrier. But if you run at the wall, you can use that momentum you've gathered to sort of jump over it. So you're just completely avoiding the thickness or hardness of the wall. You're just going over it using that momentum you have to go over it. That's the same thing over here. If you noticed, you're just using the momentum that this check has given you to evade black's pin here. Now if you were to play any other move like knight to e3, he would capture your queen and it's game over. You've just sort of lost it. But when you're using the momentum of this check, you're running at black's wall and you're gaining his piece. Now he's stuck here, the game's over. So that brings us to the end of this video. So thanks for watching, and I hope to make my next video sometime soon. This video is long overdue. I know I've been kind of busy of late, and I hope you enjoyed it. So thanks for watching, and hope to see you soon.